He saved the alien princess. Now the queen demands he stay. The transport ship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of Xylara Prime, and Jake Morrison gripped the handrail tighter, while watching the purple sky turn darker with each passing second. And the diplomatic mission was supposed to be simple, but nothing ever stayed simple when humans ventured into unexplored sectors of the galaxy. Jake was a rescue specialist, not a diplomat, but when the distress signal came from the Royal Palace, the Earth Coalition needed someone who could think fast and move faster. And at 28 years old, he had seen enough combat zones to know when something felt wrong, and this mission felt very wrong from the start. The planet below was beautiful in an alien way, with crystalline forests that reflected light in rainbow patterns and cities that seemed to grow from the ground itself, like living organisms, and the Xylaran people were just as striking with their tall, elegant forms, and skin that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, and their eyes were large and expressive, showing emotions more clearly than any human face ever could. The mission briefing had been brief, and the royal family needed assistance with a technical malfunction in their defense systems, and Earth was eager to establish good relations with the Xylarans, who controlled 3 star systems rich in rare minerals. But when Jake arrived at the palace, he found chaos instead of the formal reception. He expected guards were running through corridors and alarms blared in frequencies that made his teeth ache. And a young Xylaran woman in elegant robes grabbed his arm the moment he stepped off the transport, and her eyes were wide with fear, and her skin flickered between blue and deep purple. She spoke in rapid Xylaran, but his translator caught up quickly, and there was an attack, and the princess was trapped in the Eastern Tower, and the security systems had locked down everything, and they could not override them without risking an explosion that would destroy half the palace. Jake did not hesitate, and he asked for the layout and grabbed his emergency kit and followed the woman through winding corridors that seemed to shift and change. As they moved, and Xylaran architecture was not built for human logic, and everything curved and spiraled in ways that made no sense to his Earth-trained mind. The Eastern Tower was surrounded by a shimmering energy field that crackled with dangerous power, and the Xylaran guards stood helplessly outside, and their weapons could not penetrate the barrier without triggering the very explosion they feared. And Jake studied the field for 30 seconds before he saw the pattern, and it was cycling through frequencies, and there was a gap and a brief moment where the harmonics dropped just enough. He explained his plan, and the guards looked doubtful, but they had no better options, and Jake timed his movement perfectly and rolled through the gap just as the field pulsed and the heat singed his jacket. But he made it through and found himself in a circular chamber with walls covered in glowing symbols. The princess was there, and she was younger than he expected, and maybe 20 in human years, with silver hair that floated around her head like she was underwater, and her dress was torn, and she had a cut on her arm that leaked luminescent blood, and she looked up at him with those huge expressive eyes. And for a moment, neither of them moved. He introduced himself and promised he was there to help, and she told him her name was Luna, and that the attack had been an assassination attempt by a rival house, and the defense system had been sabotaged to trap her inside while poison gas slowly filled the room, and she had maybe 10 minutes before the concentration became lethal. Jake worked fast, and his fingers flew over his portable terminal as he hacked into the tower systems, and Xylaran technology was beautiful, but overly complex, and they built redundancies upon redundancies until everything became a maze of code and energy patterns. But human engineers had spent decades studying alien systems, and Jake had learned from the best. He found the override buried deep in the secondary protocols and bypassed the security locks one by one, while Luna watched him work, and she asked questions about Earth and about humans, and why he would risk his life for someone he did not know, and he told her it was what humans did, and they helped people, and it was not more complicated than that. With 2 minutes to spare, he deactivated the barrier and the gas vents, and the door opened and guards rushed in, and Luna was swept away to safety, while Jake was surrounded by grateful Xylarans who touched his shoulders and arms, and what he learned later was their highest sign of respect. The next morning he was summoned to the throne room, and Queen Lyra sat on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive crystal, and her presence filled the entire space with authority and power, and her skin patterns were more intricate than anyone else he had seen, and they moved in hypnotic waves of gold and deep blue. She thanked him formally for saving her daughter, and Then she made her demand and not her request, and Jake would stay on Xylara Prime as the princess' personal protector and cultural liaison, and the assassination attempt proved that Luna needed someone who thought differently than Xylarans, and someone who could see threats they might miss, and who better than the human who had already saved her life. Jake tried to explain that he had a job back on Earth and responsibilities and a life, but the queen was not asking, and she was telling, and in Xylaran culture, when the queen made such a demand, it was binding, and refusing would be a grave insult that could damage human-Xylaran relations for generations. Luna stepped forward, and she looked embarrassed but also hopeful, and she told him she understood if he resented the situation, but she would be honored to have him stay, and she promised to make it as comfortable as possible, and to teach him about their world, and maybe he could teach her about his. And that was how Jake Morrison from Chicago found himself living in an alien palace on a world where the sky was purple and the trees sang in the wind, and where a princess with silver hair and luminescent blood became his responsibility, and maybe over time something more, though neither of them would admit it yet. The first weeks were strange, and Jake learned Xylaran customs and how to read the skin patterns that revealed emotions, and how to navigate the political maze of the royal court, and Luna was patient with his mistakes, and laughed when he accidentally insulted a visiting dignitary by using the wrong hand gesture, and she defended him fiercely to the nobles who questioned why a human should be so close to the royal family. They spent hours together, and he taught her about Earth and about pizza and rock music and old movies, and she showed him the crystal caves beneath the palace, where light danced in patterns that told the history of her people, and slowly something shifted between them and professional. Distance became friendship, and friendship became something neither of them had words for in either language. The queen watched with knowing eyes, and perhaps this had been her plan all along, and not just to protect Luna, but to build a bridge between their peoples, and what better bridge than the bond forming between her daughter and the human who had risked everything to save her. And Jake realized he did not want to leave anymore, and Earth seemed distant now, and this strange, beautiful world, with its singing trees and bioluminescent people, had become home, and the girl he had saved had become the reason he stayed, and not because a queen demanded it, but because his heart had made its own demand, and one he could not refuse.